in the midst of, making your own film and planning another film down the road, you were also returning to the X-Men universe at the same time. What was that like, first of all, just to come back? It's been a dozen years since X2 came out.
Has it?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, man. Oh, my God. I just got like 6 more gray hairs and back pain.
What was it like to sort of jump back into that universe now that a lot had changed, obviously, the characters had changed, and you were dealing with a different timeline at this point?
It was great because it felt like a reunion. Because Bryan Singer got the band together, back together again, essentially, because it was Bryan, myself, Dan Harris, and Simon Kinberg, and we just kind of became this little team, and it was neat to sort of get reunited, not just with the people behind the camera, but also with the characters. So to suddenly be writing for Mystique or Professor X, it just felt like a comfortable shoe.
Anything you can say about Apocalypse himself, because he's the title character, I guess one of, along with the X-Men. What was your approach on him?
It was interesting because the way that Bryan approaches the X-Men franchise is making it as realistic as possible and as grounded as possible. And with someone like Apocalypse, that's really tricky because he's literally such a giant character. But what was fun was sort of talking about, like, okay, well, let's say the first mutant really was worshipped as a deity. And then once you just sort of take that seed and run with it, the character kind of writes himself, because the idea that he sort of comes from a world where things might have been reversed, where mutants weren't a persecuted minority, that there was a period when they were considered supernatural deities. I mean, it's a fascinating premise. And then what happens when that character, in sort of a Rip Van Winkle fashion, enters our world where everything's flipped? You can kind of use your imagination, but it sets up a character that I think is relatable in a weird way. Like what would happen if you woke up 1,000 years from now and the world you knew had completely shifted, probably for the worse. It just made that character not just not just a big guy hell-bent on world domination, but it gave him a heart that I think we could all relate to on some level.
They're making a lot more X-Men movies now with the various spin-offs and facets. This, they're positioning Apocalypse as sort of the end of a trilogy, but it's within a bigger series. They've all been sort of period films. This one's set in the 80s. Did you guys have a lot of conversations about, without giving anything away, about how you would position things moving forward? Because it seems like they probably won't want to keep it in the 80s, going forward. Did you talk about, okay, what's the next step, especially because you're introducing a lot of new characters, or new versions of old characters, I guess, in some cases?
We actually didn't talk that much about where things were going to head. I mean, Dan and myself were primarily brought in just to work on the story for this film and didn't have as much of a hand in the screenplay itself. So things might have changed, but at that sort of foundation level, we were really focused on just laying the groundwork for this film, and knowing that of course you're going to have an ending that opens itself up to more exploration. But I mean, because the X-Men universe is sort of, I think, built for that. It's built for growth and expansion and going down weird new avenues by introducing all these strange mutant characters. So you almost don't have to worry about that as much.
Right. There'll be a lot of people working on it.
Yeah, exactly. But also, it's like, well, once you introduce young Jean Grey into a new X-Men film, I mean, where do you think it's going to go? I mean, it's got to go in some directions.
Right.
I mean, that's all I'm going to say.